Welcome, everyone, and thank you very much to our wonderful international expert on the School Autonomy and Social Justice Australian Research Council grant, Professor Lisbeth Lundahl from Umeå University in Sweden. And Lisbeth, it's lovely to have you here, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. How does the school systems, how do they ensure quality, whatever that might mean, quality of teaching, quality of education? If you've got big companies making money out of schools, you've got lots competing with one another, what sort of tools, so to speak, does the state use to regulate what's going on and ensure some sort of quality, consistency?
Until 2011, when the both curricula and the Act of Education was changed, you say that there was more degrees of freedom for free schools to have profiles and so on. From 2011, they have to follow the same national curricula, syllabi, as the public schools. They are also subject to inspections, and I mean, in principle, well, the same rules as public schools, but they're also given the same kind of funding. But in contrast to, I mean, public schools have a duty to welcome all kinds of students. On paper, free schools have the same duties, except for, well, with some exceptions. They don't have to rebuild the whole school. I mean, they could say, no, this is a disabled student that will cause us a lot of extra funding. But the public school has to do that. And in reality, those free schools attract resourceful students from resourceful homes. So they have, on average, there are exceptions, but I mean, on average, they recruit the easier students.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Elizabeth, do you know proportion, like what percentage of schools now in Sweden would be public schools and what percentage would be free schools?
As you can see here, it's about, in the whole Sweden, around 15% of all compulsory students go to a free school, and about 30% go to an upper secondary school today. You can also see that this has changed in a very, very short time. But it depends very much if you live in an urban area. There is the proportion much higher. So in the Stockholm area, about twice the proportion. Almost 60% of all upper secondary students go to a free school, and most of those free schools are limited companies with a right to extract profits. And in all Sweden, or in the Stockholm area, about twice as many as in the whole, or twice the percentage, 30% go to a free compulsory school. So it's a very, very dramatic change, and that affects everyone in school, from students to the school leaders.
So can you talk about how it affects them? How it affects them. How it affects them.
How it affects them. Yes. Well, I would say that one very serious result of this is increasing segregation. That one kind of students, schools attract or host different kinds of students. So the mix of students that you used to have in Sweden, we had very low segregation. It has changed dramatically, and especially in the urban areas. You have schools with the most alert and brightest, and often with very resourceful parents. In some schools, you have schools in problematic suburbs of the cities in other schools and so on. So the between school differences have increased enormously. And the defenders of the system argue that this is because of housing segregation, but that is not true, and that has been proved in different research studies. That is one consequence, and maybe the most serious. But then there are others, like, as I said, the inner life of schools. I mean, what people have to work with in order to meet the demands of this system, to attract and retain students. You have, and also I can see, as I do research on young people's transitions, and I can see that both career counselors and students have big difficulties to get an overview of this system. I mean, it's very much a choice of schools as much as a choice of upper secondary program. And I can also see in my research that there is little time to talk about occupations and the labor market. You are so focused on, I mean, the choice of schools and programs. And that is felt both by students and counselors. Yeah, I could say a lot about this, but I don't know how much time you have.
Well, I think that sort of, you're now really touching very powerfully, Lisbeth, on this final question about the social justice implications of autonomy and how it's out in Sweden. And one of the things that you've said very powerfully is about the entrenchment of segregation. So in levels of social segregation playing out across schools, and how that's really increasing levels of social disadvantage and segregation in ways that have not been known to Sweden in the past.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. So I mean, we can see very strong social justice implications, and we have had, well, big public investigations, commissions investigating this, and the last one publishing its report, 2020, among other things, suggested that the funding to free schools should be reduced because they have lower costs than public schools on average. And they also had suggestions about prohibiting what is possible today, to put your child in the line or queuing for a place already from the child's birth. I mean, that means that if you come from another country or just another municipality or whatever, if you're not aware of this system, you don't have equal opportunities to exert your choice. I mean, things like that. But it's doubtful that there will be a political majority behind this, even if the voters would prefer it. There is a gap between the MPs on the conservative liberal side and their own voters. So they defend this system, which is crazy.
So if I'm a refugee background parent, and in theory I get the same amount of money for my student voucher as white middle class Swedish parent for their child, what's to stop me from sending my child to a more affluent free school in Stockholm, for example?
Well, that is one argument from the defenders of the system, that migrant students would benefit from this. And at the individual level, that may be true, but not on average. I mean, it doesn't play out that in general. On the one hand, immigrant parents often don't have the same kind of knowledge about the system as other parents. We have seen that in various research projects. But it's also about, being able to send your child, having the practical possibilities to follow a younger child across the city. It's about, so it's both about material resources and symbolic capital. And when it comes to upper secondary education, it's also about grades. So if you have lower grades, you normally don't, and it's a very popular school, you don't enter because of that.
Okay.
So there are various mechanisms. So it won't work like that at the statistical level.
So Lisbeth, before we finish, is there anything else you would like to add?
Yes, lots and lots. I don't know. Today I will have a seminar in Europe. It's the Education Policy Network of the European Education Research Association. And it is the question for me there is to discuss, is there a way to change this system? Or have we reached the point where this is so extensive and the actors defending it are so powerful, so it's very difficult to change? I want to be optimistic, but I can see that there are many obstacles. What I can see is that even the defenders of the system are starting to be a bit cautious because it has gone too far in many respects. But they don't want to change the system. They just want to make certain amendments. So it will be possible to continue with this. So there is definitely voices advocating change, but I'm a bit pessimistic about a change of the system as such.
Would you, if you were able, what would your recommendations be? Because in English we have a saying, a proverb where we say you can't unscramble an omelette. So the omelette, has been made. You can't unscramble it. What would you like to see happen?
Well, in Sweden, I would certainly. What is necessary is to change the funding system. If you have a 100% tax funding of free schools, they will be able to make big profits, and that's not reasonable. Changing that would be, and I would like to prohibit all kinds of profit making, as it is the case in other countries. You can have a private school, but you're not allowed to take money out of it. You have to reinvest surplus, and that would be the reasonable way. So things like that. But if I should give recommendations to other countries that are in the beginning of such a process, I think my strong recommendation would be to make demand very serious investigations before you start something like this. Because what happened in Sweden was that the non-socialist government coming to power in 1991 was so eager to make this happen, so they didn't have time to make the common investigations, because then they were afraid that there would be a new period of government when they would not be in office anymore. So they did this, and they were naive. They admit that themselves. The minister, the then school minister, admits that they were naive. Nobody could foresee this kind of development.
It's like they've let the genie out of the bottle.
But the sad thing is that even when they started to realize that they were naive, the defenders and the powerful networks between politicians, capitalists, lobbyists, media, and so on, made it very difficult to happen.
Yes, and we see that happening in Australia as well.
Well, I read somewhat about it, but I think if you could take Sweden as the bad model and learn from it.
Well, thank you so much, Lisbeth. It's been a really fascinating journey into Sweden, and certainly some very important lessons, I think, for us to take away as well.